Dominic Perrottet, thanks so much for your time. The Prime Minister said this needed to be simple. There's a lot of confusion out there this morning. It's anything but simple.
Well, what's most important is not the program, Laura. I think it's the outcome. And I think this entire package, the joint agreement between the New South Wales government and the federal government will get weekly payments up to $10,000 into businesses who are doing it incredibly tough right across our state. But that, in addition to the other measures that we have in New South Wales, I believe will keep as many businesses going during this difficult time and ultimately keep as many people in work. And that's what success looks like. And I think this agreement and the other measures that we have will achieve that ends.
Can you explain how it works? Because the thing that business seem to be confused about this morning is that they have to retain staff in order to get these payments. But does it mean that they just need to stay on the payroll and you can reduce their hours to 0 if need be?
Yeah, and I think where some confusion is, it's not that you can only access one of these programs. You can access all of them. And for businesses out there, this payment that comes in where you don't have to reduce staff is important because it keeps that connection between the worker and the employer. But ultimately, the disaster payments, which comes through Services Australia, are also available to workers right across the state. They don't have to be disconnected from their employer. And yesterday, we expanded that to ensure that workers right across the state, whether you're in a hotspot in metropolitan Sydney or otherwise, if you've had your hours reduced, you're able to access that payment. So for businesses across the state today, they can know that their workers are able to access the Commonwealth payment through the disaster payment scheme, which they can access through Services Australia, and businesses through Service New South Wales are able to access the payment arrangement we came out with yesterday, up to $10,000 every week for businesses, plus all the other business grants, the payroll tax relief that we're providing businesses right across the state.
Right, okay, so the confusion lies in a word in the press conference that said business need to maintain, quote unquote, their staffing levels. But just to be crystal clear about this, it means that you can't sack your staff. You've got to keep them on the payroll. If you own a restaurant and you're not open, you're obviously not paying your staff because they're essentially furloughed. But they're ready to go when you do open once again. So those staff members can access the disaster payment. They still stay on the books.
Yes.
And the business can get 40% of their payroll, and that money can be used to, pay creditors, etc.
All other fixed costs. Ultimately, what businesses will do, and we've seen, given many businesses right across our state are closed right now, the hours of their staff are naturally reduced. So what we're saying to businesses today is that they should let their staff be aware that they can access this disaster payment through Services Australia. And then the cash injection that we're providing with the Commonwealth program, but also through the multiple programs that we have here in New South Wales, they can apply those funds for their other fixed costs. So they're not mutually exclusive, they both work together.
And you've done the costings on this. How much will it cost?
Well, for New South Wales, we're looking at a cost of over $4 billion for our state, but we've always said we'll put the economy before the budget. Success in a pandemic is not where your budget position is at. Ultimately, it's about keeping as many people in work, keeping as many businesses going. We've come through a very difficult last 18 months. Yes, this lockdown looks to be continuing, but we will come out stronger the other side. And our job from the New South Wales government perspective is to make sure we provide businesses with the resources to keep their staff on, pay their fixed costs. So when we do come out the other side, which we will, we'll be able to be back to where we were at the outset of this lockdown. So
what have you based this on? How long are we going to be in lockdown? What modelling have you done around that?
Well, I mean, obviously we'll take the advice of the health teams in relation to that. The case numbers here in New South Wales are still jumping around a bit. Ultimately, the support package we put together has been over an 8-week period. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that's where the lockdown
8 weeks from now
is going to end. No, 8 weeks from the outset. So we're coming into week 4, which begins next week. But that,
do you think that
doesn't necessarily mean I'm
looking at the numbers.
Well, I think, you certainly see where we are in Sydney at the moment. It's certainly a lot quieter and people are following their health advice, and that's positive. And I think ultimately that will ensure those case numbers come down over the next week. But the packages of support that we've provided don't just say, well, we're going to be in lockdown for that period. If we get out of this situation faster, that's a great thing, and then these support packages will help during the recovery.
It all sounds very complicated, Dom Perrottet. Why don't you just go with JobKeeper?
Well, obviously we were looking at that from our perspective here in New South Wales, but as I said, I'm less concerned about what the program is. I think if you look at the quantum of investment that we've made here in New South Wales, over $4 billion in support packages for businesses and workers, that will ensure there's the cash available for businesses to get them through it. And I'll be working very closely, and I've had numerous discussions with all the business sectors, the industry groups, to make sure that all members know what programs are there for them to be able to access during this period of time. And I believe what we have put together over the last few days will ensure that we keep as many businesses going, as many people in work, and we're going to come out stronger the other side. Our country's had an incredible success rate when it comes to keeping people safe from the pandemic. Our economy is stronger than it was from the outset here in New South Wales. This is difficult, it's challenging, there's a lot of people hurting, but we'll come through this stronger than ever.
What do you say to the people in Fairfield this morning that have been lining up for hours upon hours to get tests because of a new public health order from Brad Hazzard yesterday? There's some people that couldn't even get into their own homes because of the length of these testing queues.
Well, I apologise to them. That they shouldn't have been waiting for many hours to get tested, but also to thank them, because the sacrifices that people are making right across our state is ensuring that we're keeping people safe. So
how are you going to
we know
it?
that.
I mean, we're going to hear from the
Well,
Premier
ultimately,
today.
yeah. Well, so there's a few things. Firstly, I think there's been a bit of confusion in relation to the 3-day testing. Testing is not required until Saturday, and also for those people who live in Fairfield, who work outside the area and need to be travelling, they can also get tested at many other venues across metropolitan Sydney. So I don't think that message has been clear enough. But obviously we have crisis cabinet later this afternoon as well, and where extra resources and testing sites are needed, we will open those up. But also I think the message needs to be clearer that you don't necessarily need to go to have your test in Fairfield. There are a number across metropolitan Sydney that can be accessed right across the board.
Can you understand why Victoria is so frustrated this morning? They haven't missed. They've said that they're sick of trying to scrap over government support. What is it with New South Wales? Do you have a better relationship with the Prime Minister or something?
Well, I think we have a robust and constructive relationship, but I think Victoria obviously welcomes the package to some degree, because they know when New South Wales goes well, the country goes well. We put $4 billion of support measures in place here in our state, and the Victorian government has been very good to the New South Wales government in providing advice for our support packages as well. I mean, Tim Pallas has been in regular contact in relation to the support that they provided during their lockdown period. They've also provided access to the tracking and tracing teams if required. So one thing that I've certainly been buoyed by, I know we like to talk about division, but the constructive relationship and the engagement between the state treasurers during this time, for me, has been incredibly comforting, and I've really appreciated the advice that other treasurers have provided who have gone through a difficult time in the past to help New South Wales get through this.
I've just looked at your costings here. You've called this job saver. That didn't really get through to the press release yesterday. Did you settle on business support instead? Why is that?
Well, I probably shouldn't get involved in the marketing game. What's more important for me is to make sure that the packages of support that we provide to our businesses, to our workers, get them through. And I think the combination of the federal government's agreement with us yesterday, plus the other support packages, will ensure we get every business across the state through this difficult time.
Dominic Perrottet, thanks so much.
Thanks, Laura.